Thanks, Brian. I also would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people on the land that we're meeting today, and I acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. Firstly, I just wanted to say thanks to the team at Cowra. You've supported our touring program since it started in 2013, and we've had lovely exhibitions here, and it's always wonderful for us to be able to get the work out to such great galleries and regional galleries. Obviously, I was the chair of the Regional Gallery Association in South Australia. They are so important and do so much on so little, so well done to the team here. So I guess really I thought I might just quickly say a little bit about JamFactory, because it actually has an impact about or why these sort of exhibitions started, but then they just sort of went on their own trajectory. So JamFactory has been around for nearly 50 years. We started in 1973 as an organisation for the development and promotion of craft and design in South Australia and Australia. And so we've always had studios. Mostly what we do bring is emerging artists and designers into JamFactory for a period of time, and they work in different disciplines. When we actually started, it was glass and leatherwork and textiles and ceramics, but now when we moved over to the gallery, the new space in 1991, so it's not really that new anymore, and we've totally outgrown it, is that we sort of changed the disciplines that we sort of focused on, and from that time we've looked at ceramics, jewellery and metal design. We've got ceramics, jewellery, glass and a furniture studio. So it was really interesting when Brian sort of moved over from Sydney. He was at Object for a number of years. You would know the space. And he was sort of looking at the disciplines, and we sort of decided about looking at the disciplines in JamFactory, but about expanding our audiences and looking at those crossovers. So looking at a material base, but looking at across architecture, art and design, and sort of bringing those audiences into our space. And we were originally going to just look at the materials based at JamFactory. So as Brian mentioned, we did start with wood. We're looking at our furniture studio as a sort of nexus for it. And it was a fantastic exhibition, and we, for that one we also partnered with the Botanic Gardens in South Australia and the Museum of Economic Botany in particular, which is one of the world's last Museum of Economic Botany, and if you're ever in Adelaide, do go see that space, it's incredible. So when the next one we went to after the wood was that we actually decided to do glass, and so we did glass, and we were looking at all these sort of interconnections. Then all of a sudden, when we got to metal, which was going to be our next one, metal being so vast, you've got precious metals, you've got some industrial kind of metals, and we really wanted to set ourselves a challenge and looked at what sort of programming had happened in that sort of sphere in the past. And obviously there'd been lots of gold or silver shows, obviously, and there had been one aluminium show that we could find. So we really set the challenge about to do a steel exhibition, which was really fun, I must admit. There was 29, I went a bit excited on steel, and how it fitted in a truck, I have no idea. And so once we got to steel, we realised that actually we were sort of on these trajectories of maybe modern materials. Obviously, concrete isn't a modern material, it's been around for about 4,000 years really, but it sort of seemed that we were moving away from just what JamFactory did. And I had to apologise to all the ceramic people around JamFactory, and there's lots, when I told them that I decided that I was doing a concrete show. But man, I really, really love concrete. I am a hopeless person who loves brutalist architecture, and I really was so excited. So there was no me going back to, I could have done brick, okay? I could have done clay, and I could have done brick, but I didn't. There's lots of ceramic shows out and about anyway. So once we got to concrete, I spent a few years absolutely giggling, going, why am I going to send one of those heavy materials around on a touring show for 3 or 4 years? What am I doing? But I've had a ball, and Brian and I had a fabulous time. All these exhibitions have been incredibly well supported through the Visions of Australia, which is a federal government grants process, program, and it's been really amazing, the support. So they provide money just for the development, which has allowed us to go around Australia to meet artists in their studios. So through the program, there's been more than 100 artists actually exhibited, and it's gone to more than 250,000 people have seen them. So it's been really exciting program. Enough about the background of it, and you can see, you'll have to stop me because I do really like concrete, but I'm not a specialist in it. So if you've come here thinking you're going to hear some science or some engineering things, wrong person. So I'm just going to give you that one. I have been asked curly questions about concrete and I don't know them. I'm not a scientist or an engineer. But anyway, I'll get it going. Or maybe I'll actually start a little bit about how we sort of looked about, we did sort of have some parameters when we were looking. Some of the things about concrete is, this incredible thing about concrete, particularly if it's used in buildings, is that it allows for this incredible sort of canvas, like, because it has this tonality to it that if you've got buildings next to trees and the light and the shift of light through the day, it actually becomes sort of this ability to have like a moving image on it. Like it does change throughout the day and they're actually really spectacular. So that was something we were looking about light and concrete and how it reacts to shadow. One of the really interesting things that really came out when we were doing some of the preliminary research is that concrete's really used quite a lot in recent time, particularly in ecclesiastical buildings. So we have in this building, in this exhibition, a mosque. Actually two mosques, I should say. The abbey as well. So it was really interesting, and you know, even this beautiful building, Indigo Slam, has that crossover to a sort of near monastery kind of feel. Another thing was about the incredible mimetic qualities that concrete has. So the different kind of materials that you use, that it can actually pick up these incredible fine details. So a lot of the buildings and things you'll notice will have these sort of natural things in it. So as we move around, I'll sort of go to that. But there were the sort of things that we were looking at. So you'll notice that in the paintings, the photos, sorry, I'm going to say paintings, so they always, I actually think they look like charcoal drawings, those beautiful photography. But anyway, I'll start and wander around, and as I said, I do get really, really excited, so do stop me if I'm going too fast, or if there's something you'd really want to hear a bit more about. But here I go. Now I feel like I'm going to be a rock star. All right, well, where shall I start? Actually, since I went with a rock star, I may as well start here. So one of the really famous, of course, types of concrete is the beautiful terrazzo, where you have the sort of materials that go into it. So in concrete you have a gravel, and the terrazzos you often have beautiful stones put in or glass that when you polish back the surface come and you'll see it. So, you know, polished concrete, often they will pour extra stones in it to get these beautiful terrazzos. So one of the world's most famous terrazzos is, of course, the Hollywood star of fame. And Elvis Richardson is a really wonderful artist. He's very much about, and I sort of feel like the workings of Elvis in the background has led to exhibitions like Know Her Name that's happening at the National Gallery of Australia. She has, for many, many years, looked at the underrepresentation of women in galleries, or sort of how many women's works are in the back of galleries and collections, and she has for many years issued this thing called the Countess Report, where it actually gives you data every year about the galleries and how many artists, women artists have been represented. So, and her name, Elvis wasn't her name that her parents gave her. She sort of has created this art sort of person who's Elvis Richardson. And so what she decided she was going to put her name on the Hall of Fame and sort of put it out there. And I just think it's fabulous work. So I went from rock star to art star. So I think without sort of people like Elvis sort of reminding us, I definitely don't think know her name would have happened. So it's great. And I will say, Nick Mitrovic has spent a long time also championing women artists. I wouldn't say it's just Elvis. I should say that. Anyway, one of the really interesting things, as we know about concrete, is that obviously it's fantastic, but there's issues like concrete cancer and concerns like that. And one of the reasons that definitely happens is because in our modern sort of uses of concrete is that we use steel inside it. And so the thing with steel being used inside it is that any time that you actually get a space where, or that they actually use lots of RIA, you will see on building sites already is rusting. So what actually that causes it to do is once it gets exposure to air, the steel, it expands and contracts. And what that is doing is actually over time cracking the concrete. And so one of the works here is by Kyo Hashimoto and Guy Ceulemans. And so this sort of work is about that process. And so the whole thing about making these sort of, they look a little bit like bombs, but is that they have that rebar in it. And so eventually this necklace, in theory, would all fall apart and deteriorate.
Someone this week at the gallery suggested they looked like COVID.
Oh, it does now, even weirder. Yes, well, it does definitely. So yeah, actually, really interesting work. Their practice has definitely, Kyo is a jeweller and Guy is an academic at UNSW and he's got a design background. And they definitely look at these sort of social or economic or industrial problems that we've got and sort of make works that respond to it. And in a really poetic way. Guy went to Eindhoven, which is an amazing design school overseas, and so lots of the leading thinking around design comes out of that school, and you'll find lots of former Phantasma, which are very leading designers, industrial designers, all have this sort of complex about life cycles of objects and where do we start and where do the materials go back. So I think that's really interesting. I might go for life cycle over to Megan Cope. Is a quantum artist, and I mean, this piece here is in the Reformation series, but the one that some of you might have seen or seen pictures of was a really huge version of Reformation that was actually part of the National down at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. So her work is looking at sort of the middens that throughout Australia that were mined to actually create the lime that have built all the buildings. So Sydney, the one, Bennelong Point had a huge midden that was flattened to actually build the buildings of Sydney Cove. So it's about that sort of thing, about that transformation of landscapes from sort of when with Indigenous people building up these landscapes, and then once the white Australian people have come in, and how we've flattened so many of these landscapes for these kind of materials. And one of the things that Megan does is when she actually goes to different places to make these incredible pieces. So the one that was in Sydney would have been 6 to 8 metres and sort of about as high as me and went round a room, was that she actually then casts these from local oyster shells. So throughout the different work, she has worked with about 6 different native Australian oysters. So amazing work and amazing artist. So I am doing a lot of the females, see, subconsciously it's creeping in. I always laugh about this exhibition because actually the statistics aren't great on it. Elvis will have me in check, but I always say to her, the most strong and the largest work in the show are all by women. So does that balance it out? Maybe, I don't know. Surin Maestro, who's actually moved to the Blue Mountains, who's now based in New South Wales. Lots of her work is actually looking at that modernist art, sculpture, really strong kind of masculine works that were around, and sort of inverting it into the female form. So looking sort of that geometric and sort of defining and sort of making linear and simplified human body forms. But lots of these works, and you'll see that, were actually done when she had, in the lead up and post her pregnancy with her first child. So this one's pretty obvious once you know that, and of course this one of her belly while she was pregnant. Another one, as I said about the mimetic qualities of concrete, it's about the curing time. The slower and, like, concrete can go off, it does go off really quickly, but the slower and the more sort of granulated, cement that you use in it will allow you to pick up all these incredible features in a work. And so these pieces, Anna Horn, who's a South Australian based artist, actually these are all PVC cushions that she makes. She cuts them, sews them all, and actually this isn't polished. This is all from the slow curing of the concrete with the dyes and pigments in it that actually just picks up the sheen from the PVC. So it's just spending time. And you look really closely, is all the beautiful stitching. And she always plays with that idea of the soft and the hard, the heavy and the light. She did these beautiful works in Adelaide in one of the parklands where she just had these concrete things and it looked like they were pulling down the boughs of the trees, but the boughs of the tree, but it wasn't. It was just lightly tethered. But incredible ones. And the ones over here she's sewn with leather and different materials to bring out. And again, sort of here we've got that play. It looks like it's really being crushed onto it, and like there's a weight in that steel, but that still weighs nothing. That's holding it onto that thing, but it looks like it's got a lot of tension. As I said, I might go to some of the architecture buildings. The piece over here is one of the newest mosques in New South Wales, and it was done by Candelabras Architects. And I guess one of the things about, when I was talking to a number of the architects, and like a bit like me, they obviously are very excited by concrete. I mean, obviously it's a necessary things for foundations, but sort of talking to Candelabras and talking to Durbek Block Jager was particularly about how much the variety and the ability of concrete to do so much, because it's a liquid when you're first using it. And so one of the things about this mosque is really playing with that idea that concrete is a liquid and that you can freeze it in time. And so this is a building not prefabricated, it was poured on site. So, and so you have these incredible domes. There's 99 half domes on the ceiling. They were all poured. So this is why there is this sort of dot in it from the pouring. But now, this is actually earlier. Now all that sort of ceiling has been painted and has beautiful calligraphy and script written on it. And all those little dots have glass in them. So they actually shimmer like a starry night. But yeah, it was definitely with that sort of tension. Like it is a liquid. You can feel like it's falling down onto you as a liquid, but it just is frozen because of all the structures. And again, similarly, the work here by Smart Design on Judith Nielsen's home, Indigo Slam, which won so many awards. Like, this is one of the works that I said about the shadows. So that site, the angles and the kind of pigment. When we're talking to Smart Architecture, they were talking about trying to get the right colour into that concrete. And so it's quite a white, the concrete of that building. And they were talking about the leader, the owner of the business. He spent, so as I said, like it's poured, it's a liquid, which means you have all that building and all the timber work and the framework that is made, and he used to keep going, he'd walk his dog past this site every day and making sure that all that structure was aligned correctly, because they wanted to get those really particular fine details of those shadows of that building as the day progressed. And the mimetic quality is obviously here again showing that beautiful, the works again, where you've got that building in all the timbers. Both this one and the Hawthorne House have used those, and lots of them actually, the sites choose particular timbers that have those intense grains. So the works over there, they did do some sandblasting onto the timbers to make sure that grain work definitely came out. But this actually shows one of the other qualities of concrete is that its thermal capacity. So the monastery or the abbey actually with the Black Saturday fires in Victoria actually only has a road one way in. And so when they sort of experienced the difficulties of getting out of that site, they went to get a building. So it's actually a fire bunker as well. So it's completely thermally safe for the monks to actually go into this space next time such a horrific sort of fire happens. And as we know, in Australia, it's going to just continue to happen rather than not be part of our future. So but Tom plays with that structure and density and confidence of a building. Actually, every single one of these concrete pieces don't need these structures. They all stand on their own. But he plays with that idea, sort of how we perceive something as being strong or structurally sound. And he talks often about he just really wants to do it on high-rise buildings and put these massive public artworks out. So have a look at them. Like, he plays with that tension and sort of see that they are all self-sustaining. They will sit on this plinth without them. So again, that beautiful mimetic quality in the work by Cheb. I will go over to Jamie North's piece. Jamie actually grew up in Newcastle but has moved to Sydney. But it's interesting sort of being from Newcastle, then Sydney. What he actually now uses as one of his really materials is the slag from steelworks. So in that is actually a concrete base that he actually goes, so he actually goes down to Wollongong and actually gets the material. And I think it's really interesting about how this sort of returning, because concrete isn't a material that actually can be recycled very well. Like, it's actually sadly not, and I think it's really interesting that I was just discussing the other day about how life, like a long living building these days, is only seen to have a lifeline. Extremely long lifetime of a building is 100 years. Like, it's just that kind of mentality that we've got to is, and that's a really specific feeling. We're talking about Indigo Slam and we're talking about maybe that bunker, but most other buildings don't even have a 100-year lifespan in them when they're built.
Yeah, it's sort of well documented that buildings like in Rome, the concrete that they used had the ash from the windows. So hence they've got buildings that are lasting 3,000 years.
Yeah, and they go, and that kind of concrete, the pyrolithic sort of sand that they were using, actually got harder over time. So
say that they're running out in the world.
Yeah.
Sand that's required to make the concrete.
Yeah, and that's one of the definite things, like about the sand mining and the sand stealing that happens with concrete. There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of. Like, it's really complex for us, like, when you think about concrete, like, one of the statistics that kept coming to me, and it just kept blowing my mind, that concrete is the second most used material after water, like, a substance in the world. Like, this is quite, like, it's really hard to fathom. And because, you know, buildings, particularly in what we used to call the developing nations, is where so much is being built at the time. But yeah, exactly, it's not built the way it once was. That's those issues with the steel in it and things like that. So, but there is ways to use it. Like, there's really great, when we do these exhibitions, we always do symposia and sort of do it cross disciplinary again, and we had some fantastic engineers that are using, working with this sort of plasticised concrete, and there is developments, but like a lot of those things, and I guess some people might have seen on Australian Story, it's actually lots of those things need governments to change our sort of regulations about what can be used in building materials, and that is actually a slow process. So it's interesting about, we're sort of tied to these materials as they are, not where they could be. It's a bit of a slow lag, which is sad, yeah. And I mean, that was the thing. It's also, concrete has the largest carbon footprint on the planet. But again, because it's the second largest used material, so is it so bad when you do the statistics and break it down? Like, but yeah, it's not perfect. Unfortunately, none of the materials we use is perfect. So I guess using sort of this off material is, and how can we sort of work with scientists? And I think there's been a lot of things in recent years about artists, designers and architects working with scientists and engineers to come up with materials, really exciting projects. And I was just at the Powerhouse, and there's a few sort of interactions there that are showing these use of new materials. So Jamie, as I said, is using these sort of slag materials into his work, and this particular body here is actually really quite a personal story and quite poignant, because his grandfather actually did work in the steelworks in Newcastle and actually experienced a horrific accident where he slid into one of the acid baths. And this is why all Jamie's work is about regrowth and regeneration. And so, you know, all those incredible little bits. I love when I'm walking around Sydney and places like that, where you see sort of in the cracks and up on buildings, life growing out of the most impossible sort of places. But this work doesn't, because this is his great-grandfather. And yes, so it's interesting, really powerful work. And as I said, these incredible works by a commercial, Rhiannon started as a commercial photographer, particularly working in architecture photography, doing interiors and exteriors for architects. And over time, it's just amassed these incredible amount of photos in, and then started playing with these layering. And as I said when I started the talk, that I always feel like there's sort of these incredible charcoal drawings. Are they paintings? Are they drawings? Are they sort of watercolours, or are they just photos? So incredible work for that. And I will talk about a very, very sort of industrial piece, two industrial design piece. One from the most humble and fun people that we sort of went and visited is Oliver, who's Wood Melbourne. We went to his, on a stinking hot day, it was 42 or 43 in Melbourne, to his sort of factory, and it's very nice that they're quite close together. He actually has a skateboard ramp in his studio. He's all about experimenting. He is a carpenter. He that's why it's sort of this play of Wood Melbourne, his background being wood. But he's sort of, as Brian and I kept saying, the real deal. Like, he just sort of wanted to do something and really pushed it, and now makes these incredible sinks and taps, beautiful taps with concrete, and has sort of high-end restaurants, hotels. Interior designers are now using his products all around Australia. So, you know, like, and he's just great value. So I guess I should say Convict, because we're in Melbourne, we talked about a skateboarder. Convict, some of you might know, is actually the world-leading skateboard designers, one of the world-leading. They started, well, 25 year anniversary was when we opened this show. And they started in Margaret River, was their first ever skate park. They've done huge ones. The world's largest one in China, it goes over several hectares, was designed by Convict. So the mix of people that they have in that space are landscape architects, they have engineers, they have a whole lot of ex-pro skaters working there. It's an incredible sort of place, and sort of that melding, I guess, that organisation is doing what we say this exhibition does, like bring these cross-disciplinary people in to come up with really great ideas and designs. And maybe another one, just because I am in New South Wales, and then I'll probably finish because I can keep going, is the beautiful piece by Adam Goodrum, which is that bench at the back there. Adam is one of Australia's leading industrial designers, mostly focused on furniture. He has won many national and international design awards. He has designed for Colt, he's designed for Tate, but internationally Capellini, and I'm trying to think who else. Alessi he's designed for, so great portfolio. Verve Clicquot you also work for. That's not a bad one to have worked for. So this one was actually for another incredible organisation and design organisation called Brooch Commission that are based in Victoria. Brooch Commission sort of work with themes and ideas, sort of social histories to come up with collections. They work with Australian designers to come up with a range of things. So they recently they just did a collection with John Goulder, who's actually a fifth-generation furniture maker, very rare in this country, and sort of looked at the history of his family's furniture business. And this one was Brooch Commissions for the works at New Acton. So New Acton, where Hotel, which is now called Nishi Hotel in Canberra, that beautiful sort of area that's been re-envisaged and really exciting part of Canberra these days. So these beautiful benches were made, and for these, Adam was looking at all the wonderful work of Walter Burley Griffin, and particularly the incinerator work. So all those incredible angles, all those, when you see Walter Burley Griffin's incinerators, all the beautiful sort of fins and designs that are in there that play with shadow lines. And so this is looking at one of those fins that were actually in, I think it's the one, I'm just kind of, it's not Castle Crag, where a lot of, sorry? Willoughby, yeah, Willoughby, thank you. Because, I mean, lots of his houses are in Castle Crag, so yeah, and just looking at that. So I'm actually standing at a perfect thing where you can get all that shadow work on that plane. But I can keep going on, but I won't, because I know you've been standing for ages. Oh, Abdulrahman, yes, yeah. Abdulrahman Abdullah, another incredible design. I'm going to get artist. He's a visual artist, Margaret. There's so many words happening. He's based in Perth, and he actually started his career working for places like the zoo, making animals and things like that. So worked in that commercial art sort of background. And the piece here, I had known of Abdulrahman's pieces where he'd done some incredible boxing gloves and punching bags in concrete. And sort of when we went over and saw him, so each one of the artists have given a fee to obviously tour, and a number of them will make work specifically for the show. Some we just select, a very sort of fluid way of working. And when we went and visited him, he goes, there's this piece that I've wanted to make for years and I'm going to make it for your show, which was fabulous. And it's actually, the bust is actually of his brother-in-law, who actually spent many years as a boxer, and you'll see that with his nose. And he told us of this great story when his brother-in-law came home one night and he'd been in a bout, and his sister kept saying, you look strange, and it was because his nose was actually on the wrong side, like it had been broken so many times, but it used to face this way, but that night it was facing this way. So you can see that on that nose, that sort of thing. But it's about that strong and Brillo that we think about concrete and being so tough, but actually supposedly his brother-in-law is a big softie, of course. But yeah, it's that sort of, it's a male and masculine kind of material that we think of, concrete, but I just think it's absolutely beautiful. So there we go. Any other questions?